welcome to Imaginations project from the UMAC FUTURES. My name is Zhao from the Electronic Science and Technology Museum, University of Electronic Science and Technology of China in Chengdu City, Sichuan, China. I work as the co-chair of the UMAC FUTURES as well. It is an organization of young scholars and emerging scholars from university museums around the world. In this project, we make online talks with emerging scholars from different countries, from different districts, different university museums, to listen to their voice, to follow the imaginations from them. It's kind of the observation and the description of the current image from their perspectives to re-image and to reconstruct the university museum community after the pandemic. So we hope it bring more hope, energy, and vitality. We have interviewed 10 speakers and posted the video on the UMAC website and the YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk with a young scholar from Australia. Let's welcome Kelsey McMorrow. She is the Curatorial Assistant at the Chak Museum, University of Sydney. She works with the scientific instruments connection and the natural history connection. She has assisted the curation of the open display of scientific instruments named Instrumental. So, could you please say hello to the audience and give us a brief introduction of yourself and your institution, Kelsey?
Sure. So hi, everyone, and thanks for inviting me, first of all. So as you said, my name's Kelsey, and I'm the Curatorial Assistant for Science here at the Chak Museum. So just for those that might not know, we're a museum of science, history, art, cultures, and antiquities here at the University of Sydney. We only opened fairly recently in November of 2020, and we're actually the result of 3 different museums that used to exist on our campus. So the Macleay, the Nicholson, and the University Art Gallery all coming together into one building.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. I'm so glad to have you here today. So we have enough time to share your ideas about university museums and the connections in Sydney. Okay, so we have just 4 simple questions for you. And the first question is, what is the specific project or program you are working on right now, and why? And just now you have mentioned some information and details, so you can give us a little bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So like all of us in museums, I'm constantly working on many different things. But most recently, my work is focused on our upcoming exhibition, which is called Australian Seashores. And I've been working on that with our natural history curator, Tony Gill. So this display showcases what I think are really beautiful photos of seashores, marine life, and scientific field work, which all come from our historic photography collection. And all of these photos were actually produced for what is now a classic textbook called Australian Seashores, which I have a copy of here. So this was a really significant book. It was actually first published in 1952, and it was reprinted over a period of 40 years. So it really inspired many generations of marine scientists. And my work in the project has mainly been to ensure that the exhibition is accurately documented in our museum database. So I make sure that the object lists, the themes of the exhibition, the display requirements, and all those different things are all recorded. And as our ideas or our design of the exhibition changes, I make sure that all of those records are updated so that everyone who's involved in the project, all of our different staff, can keep track of all of these things as well. And beyond that, I've also been really lucky. I got to assist in picking some of the photos for the display. And I got to proof many, many rounds of text and design documents for the exhibition and edit those as well. And now I'm actually updating the catalogue records for all the photos that are going to be on display so that we can make those accessible to the public through our online collection search as well.
Wow, that sounds very systematic, right? the real
Oh, yeah.
exhibition and the virtual one, and you prepare that
Yeah.
from both sides. Very cool.
Yeah,
Very
it's a
cool.
lot of fun. I get to work on lots of different facets of the exhibition. And I mean, it's such a fun exhibition to work on as well. So I'm really lucky.
Yeah, and as we know, Australia has beautiful seashores in the world, right? So, did you travel a lot to investigate something or not in the preparation?
I wish, but no, I
All
didn't
right.
get to. But I am from the South Coast myself, so I am familiar with a lot of the areas that are talked about in the book. But the book actually has over 100 photos of marine life and seashores in it. So it's very, all the photos themselves are very good at documenting the seashores without me having to travel, although that would have been a lovely part too.
Yeah. Very look forward to that. And how did you come up with this idea to prepare this exhibition? Because as you said, the book, the context book, it has published for decades, right? And how did you guys come up with this idea to prepare an exhibition for that?
Yeah, so I came onto the project a little bit later on as the curatorial assistant, but the idea for the exhibition actually came mostly from our curator, Tony Gill, who I mentioned before. So when he was studying science for his undergrad, he actually used the book as part of one of his textbooks for research and things. So he had personal experience with the book. And our historic photography curator, Jan Brazier, she found this whole collection. It was a really large collection of hundreds of photos in our storeroom. And she recognized that they were by a man or from a man called Dakin. And he was one of the authors of this textbook. So she realized that they were quite significant and pointed them out to Tony, and he instantly recognized what they were from, and was really inspired after seeing the photos in their original form before they were published to do this exhibition, because just aesthetically, if nothing else, they're really beautiful to look at, and there's stacks of really interesting information around them as well.
Very interesting, very interesting. We have never curated that kind of exhibition before, and that inspires us. Yeah. And what is the most difficult part in this project?
I think just the nature of kind of exhibition work. So the back and forth for us, there's a lot of really fine, as you mentioned before, it's quite systematic work. So there's a lot of close checking of documents and things as we go through each process of the exhibition, and just making sure that we really have a final, well laid out, well proofed and edited exhibition so it can be the best it can be. But it's just that process of refining and going back and forth to check everything.
Yeah. All right. All right. Do you have any idea to prepare a course, any course for the students in your campus in University of Sydney, coupled with this exhibition?
So we don't have any exhibitions for courses, ideas for courses at the moment, but we do have a lot of ideas that Tony's come up with for programs for the exhibition.
Right.
There's a lot of really interesting aspects of the exhibition to do with particularly women in science. So there'll be some really good panel talks that we hope to organise to talk about really the inspiration for many marine scientists that the book had.
All right. Okay. And let's move to the second question. Maybe the second question you have answered. Can you describe the most unforgettable experience when you are dealing with this project?
I thought this is a really good question. So as I said, it's been a really interesting exhibition to work on. And for me, it's been a lot of fun to present the history of science in kind of a different way through photographs. So it is hard to choose just one instance, but there is one that kind of stands out for me. So just while we were doing the research for the exhibition, Tony and I actually took a trip to the university archives. We were trying to find some documents that might help us to identify some of the locations in our photos for the exhibition. And after doing lots of digging, we were actually able to find and identify the location of one image that had really been bugging Tony for some time. And this was actually an image essentially of a shack sitting on a cliff that was overlooking the sea. Wow. And before we made this trip, we hadn't really understood what the significance of this particular image was. But once we went through the archives, we actually found an inscription that identified it as a biological research station at Southhead, which is on Sydney Harbour. And it turned out that this station was used by William Dakin, who I mentioned was one of the authors of the book. And he was using this station for his marine research. And I think that that's really what made it an unforgettable experience for me, because it was one of those gems that kind of comes up when you're doing this sort of research that not only solves a mystery, but actually opens up avenues for future research as well.
Oh, get that. Museum stuff, as we are all museum stuff, we always, when we just dig into the history, sometimes we find something connected with another thing, and another thing that's right. We have already know, and the whole things, they get to be a network. So that's that inspires us most. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Kelsey. And let's move to the third question. If you are curating an exhibition, maybe you can talk about this project. What objects do you want to connect or display most related to the past 2 years experience? Because in the past 2 or 3 years, we were all facing with COVID-19 pandemic or something else. Yeah.
So in my role, normally I work with scientific instruments, and even though we were closed for quite a long period with the COVID pandemic, we were still really lucky last year to be able to acquire quite a significant collection from our physiology department here at the university. And there was one instrument that really caught my eye, which was something called a Professor McHardy perimeter. And that was essentially an instrument that has a really long base, and at one end it has a chin rest with a bite bar and a rod that rests on your cheek to keep you in place. And then at the other end, it has a really large rotating arc or semicircle, and you attach targets of different colors or sizes to that arc. And this instrument was actually used in the late 19th century by eye doctors to measure the extent of a person's visual field. So the examiner would move the target along the semicircle until the patient couldn't see it anymore. And by doing this, they could actually identify any defects in the patient's field of vision. And I just thought this was a really curious instrument. It was something I hadn't seen before, and I think it would be really fun to display. Just something totally different.
Yes. Sounds very interesting. As we were exploring our course or science course, sometimes we just know the knowledge at the present, right? We didn't know how the knowledge came from, and that kinds of the instruments, they tell us how the knowledge came from. That's very cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably my favorite part of working with the scientific instruments, is it fills in all that sort of information, and you're always learning where different things or different knowledge came from, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah,
and I'm so excited to hear that, and I really want to see the photo of that instrument. as you told us.
I'll have to send you a photo.
Yeah, sure. Please. Okay. All right. Let's move to the last question. It's kind of a relay question. I call it question in the bottle. the question from the last speaker, Michelle. We interviewed her the day before yesterday. Michelle from University of Pretoria, South Africa. She is an archivist there and did a very great job, wrote some chapters, articles, focusing on the new technologies in the field of tourist guiding. She's like, think about the debating between the new technologies and the tourist guide. So, yes, very interesting and forward thinking, I think. So she asked, do you think that the virtual object or experience can be just as good as the real object or experience? Why or why not?
I thought this was a really great question and a little bit difficult. But in my opinion, of course, being someone that works with objects all the time, I do think that the real object is usually better. I think typically we are able to connect more and have more memorable experiences with something that's real and tangible than we are with virtual experiences. But in saying that, of course, with the COVID lockdowns that we've had, I do think that the virtual experience can really expand the ways that museums are able to connect with their audiences. So I guess when we were closed in particular, the virtual experience was one way that we could still reach our audience and continue to offer access to our collections during that time. And also for me, just as a researcher, virtual records of objects mean that I can study things in collections that are all over the world that I might not be able to see otherwise. So it's definitely a very valuable resource, and I think not to be discounted.
All right, so you have a neutral idea about this question. Yes, because this question is so difficult to answer, you know. Yes, when we were facing with COVID-19, we have to use new technologies to reach out. But when we were trying to have the enjoyment from the objects or research on the object, we have to touch or see the real one. So yes, it's a question that worth we discussing for a long time, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. So it was called the relay question, the question in the bottle. So what is your question to the next speaker?
Well, I think given everything that we've spoken about today and all the science that we've talked about today, my question for the next speaker will have to be, what is the most interesting science-focused exhibition that you've ever seen, and what made it so memorable for you?
Wow. Thank you, Kelsey. That's a great question. And I think everyone has his or her own idea about that. Okay, and we look forward
really to the answer.
Me too. Look forward to the answers. Okay, so thank you so much. It was really a fruitful talk with you, Kelsey, and thanks to the audience.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to the audience. Hope they enjoy it and join us next time. And last, I would like to say, UMAC Futures, we are coming. That's all from me today. See you next time.